This budget hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriation Adjudications will now reconvene, and we're honored this morning to have the Justices of the Supreme Court and the Judiciary before us today. Good morning, Justices and Madam Chief Justice. And I'll spare you my opening speech, and we'll go straight to your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, Senators Nelson, Vice Speaker Terlahi, and Senator Camacho Torres. We're pleased to be here today to present the budget request for the Judiciary of Guam, which includes the request for the alternate public defender. Present today are the 3 justices of the Supreme Court, the administrator of the courts, and our chief financial officer, the deputy director, and the management team of the court. We have a presentation, and then we're ready to answer any questions you may have. If I may refer to the administrator of the courts.
Please.
Afternoon, Speaker Cruz and members of the 34th Guam Legislature. Thank you all for giving our co-equal branch of government the opportunity to present the Judiciary's fiscal year 2019 budget. This effort comes following the adoption of Resolution JC 18-10 by the Judicial Council on April 27th. The Council was fully briefed by management, including a working session of the details that were transmitted to this body on May 1st. Their collective input has helped frame the issues and formulate the policy options that are before you today. Our budget submission is in line with our mission, vision, and core values: to administer justice by interpreting and upholding the laws, resolving disputes in a timely manner, and providing accessible, efficient, and effective court services. We continue to provide the highest quality of service, thus enhancing public trust and confidence in Guam's independent and co-equal branch of government, with professionalism, integrity, and excellence as our core values. On behalf of Chief Justice Merriman, our judicial officers, and over 400 employees of the Judiciary, thank you for your consideration of this request. I would like to tell you that the dedicated judicial officers, managers, and personnel across the Guam Judicial Center and the Northern Court Satellite have made a commitment to serve in the judicial branch of government, many as their life's calling. And a court system is only as good as the people that comprise it. Our FY19 budget is aligned with the Judiciary's strategic plan of pursuing excellence across the 5 strategic focus areas: access to court and delivery of services, effective case management, employee excellence and satisfaction, court partnerships, community relations, and finally, facilities and security. In this current fiscal year, the Judiciary has had to deal with a financial shortfall, both in our appropriations and biweekly allotments. Based on the Governor's fiscal realignment plan, the Judiciary's appropriations was reduced by $3.3 million, a 10% reduction. However, what the Judiciary is actually seeing is a reduction of more than 13%, and this is based on our biweekly allotment releases. Projecting the releases for the remainder of the fiscal year, the Judiciary shortfall will be $4.6 million. If so, we would need to further reduce our operations by $1.3 million over the next several months. Since the beginning of the fiscal year, we've implemented cost-saving measures. In March of this year, we implemented additional measures. However, any further reduction to our biweekly allotments will call for extreme measures to be taken. We ask for your continued support to ensure the judiciary is able to operate effectively and efficiently in order to meet our mandated requirements and the needs of the people of Guam. The focus of our funding request for fiscal year 2019 is to fill critical mission-essential vacancies across our branch, implement mandated reclassification of all positions in the judiciary, implement electronic monitoring program, and ensure adequate funding for our indigent defense and our treatment programs. As you're aware, the Supreme Court of Guam handles the administration of the judiciary, appellate reviews of final judgments of the Superior Court. In 2017, the Supreme Court received 72 filings. Our Superior Court handles civil, criminal, domestic, juvenile, and probate cases. In 2017, the Superior Court received 14,414 case filings, and we did see a significant increase in the number of civil case filings, up from 1,155 to 1,340, and small claim filings from 1,662 to 1,707. Not changing in FY19, the judiciary's commitment to these four efforts, beginning with our ongoing civil reform efforts, probation reform efforts of bringing a level of supervision based on risks and the needs of our clients, our therapeutic courts and programs, complementing what Chief Justice Merriman shared during her recent State of the Judiciary address, and of course our ongoing efforts with guardianship in Guam. Before we expand on this, let's take a look at the past year, starting with this slide that reflects the top offenses for 2017. Family violence, driving while under the influence, and possession of a Schedule II controlled substance continues to be the top case filings. The top three have remained the same over the last 3 years. Additionally, the trend continues to rise from small claims case filings. For 2017, as I previously mentioned, we received 1,707 case filings. Last year, I spoke on civil justice reform, the Civil Justice Reform Initiative. This is a national reform effort to effectively and efficiently address challenges in civil and domestic cases. This reform effort, like any other reform effort, is a major undertaking, and we still are developing a roadmap for the implementation of the 13 reform efforts. We continue to see an increase in civil and domestic case filings, and although we do not have the resources to implement all 13, we have started examining the cases and have developed a civil case management team to help triage cases, address the increase, and improve case management. This is a good segue for our request for an additional Superior Court judge. In May of 2016, the Committee for the Determination of an Additional Judge submitted their findings to then Chief Justice Robert J. Torres, and the report was certified by the Chief Justice and the Judicial Council in that same month. In the report, the committee cited that the judiciary has observed a 4.5 increase in jury trials since 2007. The current 7 judges continue to experience overwhelming caseloads due to the increase in jury trials for the past 11 years. The balance in attempting to dispense fair and equal justice to all who come before them has been challenging. As we presented last year, the ratio of judges to cases and the ratio of judges to Guam's population support the need of an additional judge. With support by judicial stakeholders, including the Guam Bar Association, the new judge would devote substantial amount of time to civil and non-criminal cases. We respectfully request that legislative action be taken to increase the number of judges from 7 to 8. Another priority of the judiciary is in our efforts in probation. Our probation caseload is currently 7,079, an average caseload of 161 clients per probation officer. Although the national average is 120, national recommended average is 120 low-risk clients per officer, our probation officers currently supervise both low, medium, and high-risk clients. Probation reform efforts for the past 3 years continue to yield a reduction of our caseload. This reduction has been accomplished by the implementation of evidence-based practices, to include the implementation of risk needs assessment tools, the establishment of modern caseload supervision standards, providing the necessary evidence-based education, and prioritizing treatment components for all clients. Providing evidence-based practices training for our judges, probation officers, and more importantly, our stakeholders and partners continue to yield positive results. With the implementation of pretrial risk assessment tools and in cooperation with the Office of the Attorney General, the Public Defender Services Corporation, pretrial detainees now have legal representation at their first appearance. Also, our magistrate judge now has the additional information to assist in his decision to release or remand an individual based on risk and ability to make all court hearings. This is important to protecting public safety and fostering trust in the judicial process. Our pretrial justice reform has significantly reduced the pretrial detainee numbers at the Department of Corrections. Great strides from 2016, when the detainee population was over 400. In 2017, through our work, the pretrial population was 250. Continuing with our efforts, the current pretrial population at DOC is 198. A setback related to the current fiscal crisis of the government of Guam, the Judiciary was not able to fully implement the electronic monitoring program due to a lack of availability of funds. However, Judge Anita Sokola and the Electronic Monitoring Task Force created the standard operating procedures for electronic monitoring when implementation gets underway. We are set to procure the technology when the appropriations is realized. So I am once again offering for your consideration the option in our budget to include electronic monitoring on Guam in fiscal year 2019 to enhance our ability to continue with our pretrial reform efforts. Moving on, our adult probation reform efforts continue to support two of our strategic goals: access to court, delivery of services, and court partnerships and community relations. We are improving access to treatment in our adult probation population. In collaboration with Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, specifically the agency's Substance Abuse Unit, we are now conducting substance abuse assessments. Historically, a referral would be made for an assessment where a client would have to wait 1 to 2 months for an assessment. Then they would have to wait again. Those days are behind us. This partnership with Guam Behavioral Health has assured a client is able to receive treatment immediately. We are also exploring the possibility of expanding our partnerships with nonprofit organizations in order to provide immediate access to treatment for more individuals in our community. Finally, our juvenile justice reform is in its 3rd year and continues to show the most improvement. By implementing the use of risk needs assessment tools by our probation officers, we are able to identify the respective juvenile's risk to reoffend, identify the criminogenic needs of the juvenile, and align the treatment or response based on the needs of the juvenile. When we first started juvenile justice reform, DYA's population was around 75 to 80 on a daily basis. Since the implementation of juvenile justice reform, the average population at DYA has decreased to 35 in 2017. The current population at DYA is 26, and that's the average. This would not have been made possible without our partnerships with the Office of the Attorney General, Public Defender, and Alternate Public Defender's Office, and of course the Department of Education. With a focus on probation reform, we are seeing positive gains within other areas, to include our Alternative Sentencing Office, by adding new evidence-based programs. We are improving client outcomes. Other partnerships with the Department of Youth Affairs, Guam Behavioral Health, and nonprofit organizations like Sanctuary and Enough and Malik have helped all clients provide the necessary education and treatment needed to improve their lives. Senators, the Judiciary of Guam has the following 5 therapeutic courts. Our adult and juvenile drug court continues to produce lower recidivism rates compared to the use of traditional supervision of clients. I would like to report that the immediate access to service is a cornerstone of our mental health court, and assessments and access to treatment is the foundation of our family violence court. Our adult drug court graduated 34 participants this past year. Our juvenile drug court graduated 28, and today at 4 p.m., juvenile drug court will graduate an additional 18 juveniles. Our Veterans Treatment Court graduated 14 veterans. It is our response to be able to align veterans to receive immediate services, to support veterans involved in the criminal justice system, restoring honor to valor. This would not have been made possible without the financial support to our existing therapeutic courts. As you know, we have expanded our therapeutic courts. Nationwide, there is a call to continue to implement new therapeutic courts. Thank you for the recent passage of Bill 203-34, which was just signed into law as Public Law 34-107, for the establishment of a driving while impaired treatment court. This law will support our efforts to reduce recidivism to medium and high-risk offenders. Currently, a third of our adult probation office involves DWI cases. The Guam Family Recovery Program is a new therapeutic court concept we started in 2017. This program, which will help Child Protective Service cases in which family members with substance abuse issues receive the necessary treatment, which in turn will help move the case and ultimately reunification of all family members. On a positive note, the Judiciary was recently awarded a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, or SAMHSA grant, for $1.8 million for the next 5 years. This grant will cover personnel costs, funding to pay for drug testing, and more importantly, substance abuse treatment for all participants. Funding for this program will begin in September of this year. Additionally, thank you for the passage of Bill 187-34, which became Public Law 34-81, establishing the Guam Adult Reentry Court Program. The reentry program is designed to assist inmates at the Department of Corrections receive the necessary substance abuse treatment needed prior to their release. Additionally, this program also assists inmates in receiving an education and/or job skill so that they will become productive members of our community upon their release. Finally, we have implemented our GIVE program, Guam's Immediate Violations Enforcement Program, where judicial officers are ordering swift, certain, and fair sanctions on drug clients who are not involved in our adult drug court. The benefit is that the cost of incarceration is covered under this grant. Again, these are the new therapeutic courts and programs which we have launched. From probation to the support of the executive branch, now specifically support of Guam's law enforcement agencies. Our Management Information Systems Division oversees and manages critical criminal justice information systems to include the virtual criminal case history, automated fingerprint information system, National Crime Information Center, National Law Enforcement Telecommunication Systems, and the Sex Offender Registry. The systems maintained by the Judiciary are a direct link to federal criminal justice information systems. This collaboration between federal and local government provides real-time data to all local and federal law enforcement agencies as they do their jobs on the borders and streets of Guam and in Micronesia. For just over 10 years, this has all been done under the umbrella of a Criminal Justice Automation Commission's Memorandum of Understanding. However, moving forward and in order to take advantage of federal funding opportunities, we ask for your support with legislation to establish the Criminal Justice Automation Commission. We appreciate Vice Speaker Teresa Lai's leadership for putting this before this body, and we look forward to its passage by the 34th Guam Legislature. Senators, the Office of the Public Guardian serves as court-appointed guardian of the person and or estate of the elderly or mentally incapacitated individuals. The OPG assists the court in guardianship cases, assists private guardians, families, and agencies. At the end of 2017, the public guardians serve as court-appointed guardian for 85 wards. I am happy to report here that Judiciary of Guam received a grant from the State Justice Institute to implement the National Guardianship Network WINGS program. Revised legislation is being drafted to update the antiquated Public Guardians Review Board representation, roles and responsibilities, as well as maintaining all roles and responsibility requirements, as well as maintaining all new guardians, mandating all new guardians to complete a guardian education program. The program highlights legal and financial responsibilities of guardians, as well as provides information on social services and other community resources. The Guardian Education Program was recently briefed to all judicial officers, and we are ready to launch the training over the next couple of weeks. Strengthening our workforce is not just a catchphrase. We have completed evidence-based training for our staff as well as our partners and stakeholders, including training on our adopted risk assessment instruments and case plans to ensure that as a community, we have immediate access and delivery of services to all clients. Our Judicial Education Center programs assist the court in providing classes for our employees to enhance their respective roles in the courts, courses for judges and supervisors and staff, through which they receive national certification from the Institute for Court Management. Also during the first year, the Judicial Education Center hosted various training programs that reached, among others, over 150 law enforcement officers from our branch, the Guam Police Department, the A.B. Wampat International Airport Authority, the Office of the Attorney General, in order to meet Guam's peace officer standards of training requirements. Regarding posts for this fiscal year, I'm happy to report that we have drug tested 77 of our 160 law enforcement officers, and I have not taken any disciplinary action against any of our law enforcement officers. Additionally, in our effort to provide the utmost access to justice, individuals who are of limited English proficiency or are hearing impaired, the Judiciary welcomed 19 new court interpreters from last year after they completed our basic skills program. We now have 76 registered court interpreters who support our work in 18 different languages. Here is the breakdown of our funding source. Of the 410 employees, 381 are funded through the general fund, 25 are funded through federal funds, 3 are funded through special funds, and we do have one who's funded through both federal and special funds. I'll now pass the remainder of the presentation to our Financial Administrator, Chris Badassi.
Morning, Speaker Cruz, Vice Speaker Talahi, Senator Nelson, Senator Camacho Torres. Thank you for having us here today to discuss our 2019 budget request. On the first slide we have is our general fund appropriation levels from 2016 to 2018. And you can see there was an increase of about $1 million from 2016 to 17, and then about 400,000 in 2018. And then just for a little perspective, we added the executive branch fiscal realignment plan adjusted, which shows the reductions that were done by category by the executive branch. And you can see the percentage of appropriations for the judiciary sits in the range of 5% up until this year, where it dips down because of the fiscal realignment plan. On the next slide, you'll see the general fund appropriation levels. The fiscal 2019 approved budget was $34,696,000, which represents about 5% of the overall revenues available. Our 2019 request is $36,421,521, and this represents about 5.4%. Now, we didn't really have a number to measure that against for the revenues available for appropriation, so we kind of did a guesstimate based on the initial request by the governor and the SES, and tracking the SES meetings and the revenues with the changes in the tax law. And based on all that information, we guesstimated that the revenues available would be about maybe 20 million less than last year. And so that puts it right about 5.4. That puts our request at 5.4% of revenues available for appropriation. And overall, the increase is a $1.7 million increase over last year's request. Next slide, please. Next slide here breaks down the budget compared to 2018 by classification. And you can see the majority of the increases are coming in the personnel services area, roughly 900,000+. And then there's a portion in the miscellaneous appropriation area, which is coming from court-appointed attorneys and the alternate public defender. And then you can also see there's some reductions across the board. So we did kind of look at our expenditure patterns in the other various categories, and we're able to realize some reductions based on our previous requests. So even though the increase is going up, you can see that the majority of it's coming from the mandated increments, merit bonus, things like that, things that are going to happen every year regardless. And we tried to offset some of that with some of our other reductions in the other line item categories. And as we mentioned earlier, we think it's about 5.4%, depending on what the revenues are adopted. Below that, we're also requesting $398,243 for a new judicial officer and courtroom. And then an internal equity review was done for across the board, where the department managers and the human resources department looked at all the job descriptions and evaluated them. Some of the job descriptions were as old as the 1990s. Maybe there might have been some that were even earlier, and so those were all updated. And based on the updates that were done, we need an internal equity adjustment of $1.28 million to bring those in line with the evaluation done by human resources. So those would be kind of below the line requests if there's money available and the legislature can fund that. With our operations budget and the two below the line requests, it's a 5.7% request of available money available for appropriation, and a 9.8% increase over the current fiscal 18 approved budget. Next slide, please. And you can see the increases in the payroll side are coming from organic growth is the majority of it, about 700,000. The health insurance came in 190,000 above what we had expected. At the time we came before you last year, we were in negotiations, and we hadn't negotiated our final rates yet. When they came in, they were a little higher than what we expected. So part of it's coming in from there. And then the 2019, we're projecting about 75,000 in regular increments, and there was an uptick of 23,000 for the merit bonus. And then, as I mentioned, the miscellaneous increases are coming from the alternate public defender and also the court-appointed attorneys. Next slide, please. Next slide shows our other funding sources from 2015 to 2019, actual and projected. You can see our federal grant funds peaked in about 2017, and then they're starting to come down in 2018 and projected to come down a little in 2019. I think since this slide was done, I think we've received another grant or two, so I believe that federal grant fund money for 2019 will be a little bit higher. Judicial Building Fund has seemed to level off right in the $1.6 million range for the last couple of years, and we're projecting it to be in that range as well this year. And the Judicial Client Services Fund, you can see, has also leveled off right in the $1.8 million range for 3 years running, and then we're projecting it in the same amount for this fiscal year. Next slide, please. So the FY19 estimated revenue for the Judicial Building Fund is $1.6 million. Of that amount, $993,000 is for the principal and interest on the current loan backed by the fund, leaving $669,000 available for appropriations. Of that amount, $600,000 is set aside for rental agreements, and leaving $50,000 for maintenance for the GPD crime lab and $15,000 for building repair contingency. So the fund has continued to decrease, and you can see there that there's not much left for our maintenance on our buildings after the rental agreements are done. Next slide, please. And the last slide here just shows the Judicial Building Fund subsidy to the Guam Police Department. So of that $993,000 annual loan payment, $606,000 is for the actual crime lab, for the building of the crime lab, and then the maintenance budget of $50,000 in the annual operations budget. So in total, the Judicial Building Fund is subsidizing the Guam Police Department $656,000 per year. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
I'll go again.
Mr. Speaker, if I may conclude our presentation with a brief statement. Thank you for inviting the Administrator of the Courts and the management team to present to you the Judiciary's proposed FY 2019 budget. I cannot stress enough to you that resources necessary to support the third branch of government must be sustained to ensure that we meet our Organic Act mandates and other mandates from the laws of Guam. While the legislature has done much to ensure the appropriation and transfer of funds into the judiciary, the executive branch has taken funds earmarked for the judiciary to use for other government operations. Core court operations are threatened, and reductions in services may continue. Just 5% of the total government of Guam revenues support not just the operations of our branch, but significant work for the other executive branch as well. The return on the investment in Guam's court system is significant. We have highlighted those benefits to our entire community over the past half hour. We have done more with less over the last 2 fiscal years. We are responsible with all the money you have appropriated to us. I can tell you that we are good stewards of the cash we have received. The judiciary will continue to be a model of fiscal responsibility, transparency, and accountability in the government of Guam. As you see from the slides today, we have received roughly 84 to 85% of our allotment for fiscal year 2018. These monies have gone to support successful treatment court programs, probation officers, marshals serving warrants and protecting our patrons, clerks scanning close to 45,000 file documents per month, and training hundreds of executive branch law enforcement officers. The shortfall in allotment payments has resulted in extended closures of our clerk and probation counters, slower filing in civil disputes, and increased liability due to our inability to address legislative mandates and compromise critical judicial services. Our island community does not deserve these adversely impacts to public safety services. As a responsible partner in government, we have accepted the obligation to share in the fiscal reductions necessary as part of our efforts to reduce the cost of government. However, cash impacts and cuts to our budget imperil the Judiciary of Guam's responsibility under the Organic Act to administer justice impartially, completely, and without delay. The continued underfunding, not in terms of what's been appropriated, but the cash we've received, will force us to prioritize case processing by focusing on criminal cases at the expense of civil disputes. Also, historically, the least advantaged in our community have turned to the court for protection. Underfunding our branch during these times of economic distress will result in delays in hearing their cases. It is often said that court systems need to be funded at an adequate level to carry out the responsibilities in a timely and constitutional manner, ensuring that they are open and accessible and can administer justice completely and without delay. Our fiscal year 2019 budget does just that, and I hope you will consider the Judiciary's request favorably. And if I could just add, when we were talking about the need to protect the vulnerable in our community, we were fortunate this week to have a seminar presented to the Pacific Judicial Council involving elderly abuse, and it really opened a lot of our eyes as to further needed services to address and prevent elderly abuse. And we believe through the Office of Public Guardian, a lot of that has fallen on the courts, but we're really unable to come forward and make recommendations in that area because of our lack of funding. We would like to see greater resources put into monitoring private guardians, especially those that handle large financial estates, and as well as to have maybe a social worker that could visit a couple of times a year and make sure the person is actually being well cared for by the guardian. So I just want to mention that we would ask for more programs and more funds in certain areas, but we felt restrained given the government's current position. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. I know that your statement, your closing statement, wasn't part of the presentation here, but if you'd leave it, because I really do think it's imperative that in line with what you've shown about the general appropriations, that during our chairmanship, the appropriation level to the judiciary has constantly increased. And it's not from this end of the... So I wanted to underscore that, because we've tried. Of course I understand where we're coming from in the judiciary. So I just wanted to underscore that. I want to commend the judiciary for the way that it handled itself when the FRP was announced and took that 10% cut. That was substantial, and I know it was painful. And the cash allotments, you're not the only one that's suffering it. We're suffering it also. But the decisions that have come from the court have said that cash management is not a function of this branch, and we've been admonished on several occasions when we've tried to at least from the position of the court, overstepped ourselves in trying to direct how money is supposed to be given. So just so that's said. So I just wanted to commend you for that, the entire judiciary for the way that it handled itself in that respect. The thing that I was trying to figure out is, for the listening public, though we appropriated 34 and you've been operating at 31, but you're saying you're only going to may end up only getting 28.
That's correct.
Will the court be able to continue to operate if we again just went with the 34 as opposed to the 36? I know you want the 36, but though Chris knows how we can play these numbers, that it's only it's a 1% increase over the 34, but it's a 7 million or almost a 25% increase from the 28. So we can all play that little game. I'm just trying to be realistic and ask whether or not, since you've been able to operate with seemingly 28 as opposed to even just 31, would the 34 be sufficient as an appropriation? And could you live with that?
Our budget does show that in accordance with law, we have reviewed and done a reclassification of the employee positions. That price tag is about $1.3 million. We've complied with the laws. We feel we must, but we also understand in austere times pay raises may not be funded. That's 1.3, and I hate to keep sacrificing electronic monitoring, but that's 500,000, and we leave those as options for funding. That if the money's not there, we would like to have those programs, but we understand if they can't be funded. But I should tell you, as we face the rest of the fiscal year, we're now in the process of reviewing all non-federally funded contracts, and we're going to start giving notice to our vendors that we're going to have to discontinue those contracts. We're looking at other areas where we can reduce expenditures, but that comes at the cost of further reducing probation services and other services that the court would normally want to do. Quite frankly, we have some very critical vacancies. We haven't filled a lot of positions. We've only filled, of the people that either retired or separated, the most critical of the critical positions. So we're getting close to the point where we may have to cut hours for personnel. If we're reduced and continue at this 28 million, we can't sustain it at 28. I think we could at 34, but not 28.
Thank you. And with all due respect, the electronic monitoring is not part of your appropriation. The electronic monitoring is a separate appropriation that this legislature gave and should have been requested separately. Though I commend you for the way that you've handled the rest of your appropriations, my one big disappointment, and I will say it, I said it publicly before, my one disappointment is that there wasn't a push from the monies that were coming in to implement that, because implementing the electronic monitoring would have assisted in the expenditures and the operations of probation and the Marshal Service. And that was the reason why we did it. And if we had electronic monitoring, we at least would be able to monitor where these people are, because I'm sure that in spite of all the new risk management that you're all implementing over there, that you're suffering some of the bad PR of third and fourth people being out of their homes, continuing to break into other homes or do other things that wouldn't probably be happening if you had the electronic monitoring. But we've got to, at some point, decide that the first 500 is for the electronic monitoring, do that, and then see how we go forward from that. But that's my only disappointment with the operation this year. Okay.
That's a policy choice we had to make. Do we keep
Yeah, no, I
personnel or
understand
do
that.
we?
And I'm just saying that
I understand your concern.
I won't belabor it, I just wanted to have it on the record that I'm not happy with that policy decision, because it would have assisted in all other areas and would have assisted in the overall administration of justice, and it wouldn't leave us, and I still flinch every time there's any criticism of the court. I still flinch because I still feel that that's directed at me, even if it's been 20 years. So we need to think about that, and I will attempt to put it back in again this time. And again, it's a separate appropriation, and that when the money comes over, should be separated, Chris, and implemented at the earliest possible date. With that, Vice Speaker, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice and Justice Carbolito, Justice Torres, for being here this morning, and for all the team. If I could just ask a few specific, I also want to acknowledge your, that during the fiscal realignment, the court took on a 10% cut, and that's very significant, and I want to acknowledge all of the impact of that on all of your working conditions and ability to provide services for the people. And that, as you said this morning, you're facing an allotment reduction, bringing you down from an original appropriation of 34 million to 28 million approximately. And as you've said, that's going to even more impact the services that the court is being asked to provide for the people of Guam. Can I ask, there's your spreadsheet on it says change by classification. This shows the change from FY18 appropriation to FY19 proposed budget, but I'm wondering if we could see, we don't have a detail here on how you went from 34 to 31 in the FRP cut, and if you could just add a column there that shows the changes from FRP, because this page has it broken down by personal services, benefits, travel, etc. And I would just like to see how that compares. What was cut in the FRP and under these categories? And then if I could just ask specifically, under equipment, non-capital items, there's an increase of $72,000. Could you just highlight what that is?
Sure. The main portion of that is coming from some a budget for radios for the Marshals Division. So the Marshals requested, I believe, $121,000 for their radios for next fiscal year. So there was reductions in other areas that offset it. So it was only a $72,000 increase. But that's the main.
All right. And then you said earlier, Chris, that miscellaneous is comprised of, this is an $884,000 increase, and you said it's comprised of the alternate public defender and court-appointed lawyers' fees? That's all? That's an increase of 800? Why is it such a drastic increase?
Well, when we were faced with trying to cut the 3.3 million and potentially 4.6, there was two things that happened. One, we stopped filling positions. So right now we have about 25 positions that haven't been filled that account for roughly 2.3 to 2.7 million of what we've been able to reduce this year. And then we've also shifted the payment for the court-appointed alternate public defender. And so that contract, there was a reduction from it from the prior year that offset about 300,000. And so the balance of that was moved to the client services fund to make up that difference. And so we're now asking to have that again appropriated from the general fund for the alternate public defender, because the client service fund can't sustain that. It can't continue to fund the private attorney panel and the alternate public defender. We still need to get a subsidy from the general fund. So it was okay this year to try and help us meet our FRP cuts, but if that continues, then you're going to see a rapid reduction of that client services fund, which we don't want to see happen, because then the private attorney panel will suffer.
The Client Services Fund is not subject to appropriation by the legislature? Is it? I mean, it's not included
sure.
in here as to what it's being spent
It's not
on.
included in the special fund revenues, that's correct.
Okay. Did the decrease in hours of, I think it's the intake windows, Chief Justice, was that a result of the FRP, the fiscal realignment cut of 10%, or is that a result of the withholding of allotments?
I would say both. We used to have people come in, for example, for drug testing about 4:30, and then they would have to stay later sometimes, which meant our staff had to stay later, and we were incurring comp time, and that meant potential financial liability if we couldn't give them comp time. Similarly with the filing window at the clerk's office. So in order to make sure everyone can leave the building at 5 and avoid those costs, we reduce the hours to 4 p.m. for both those divisions and the Supreme Court clerk's office.
Clerks, okay. And on the slide that shows factors driving increases in general fund appropriation, it talks about salary and benefit increases. So organic payroll growth, and then it details the health insurance, the 2019 increments, and the merit bonuses. But the organic payroll growth, if it doesn't include these increments and bonuses, what does it include?
It's essentially the full year's value of the increments from the previous year. So the increments, they vary. Some come in at the beginning of the fiscal year where you pretty much pay for it the whole year. Some come in the middle of the year where you're only paying 6 months worth of the salary increase, and some come at the end of the year where you're paying only 1 month of the salary increase. So when you get to the next year, everybody resets to the next step, and you have to account for that full year's salary growth. And so that's essentially what the organic growth is. It's taking the full year's value of the prior year's increments and putting it into the budget.
Prior year's increments, but then we're also going to appropriate for 2019 increments?
Correct. So everybody's got a schedule that they're on, and one thing we noticed with the CWA is a lot of people were reset down to the annual level, which is why we're seeing a lot of annual growth on the payroll, because they were moved from, let's say they were a step 12 and they got taken down to a step 8. So they went from every 18 months getting an increment down to every 12 months. And so
this restores it to annual, or only if the CWA is approved?
No, this was based on the CWA that was implemented.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So there was a resetting of steps for people based on that. The one you're referring to is a different study that was done just this year.
Yeah. What was the cost of that study?
It was done in-house.
It was done internally.
All right. So does the binder that we have a breakdown of the miscellaneous, that 884,000? Sorry, I'm going back again, to the APD and the court-appointed attorneys? Is that broken out anywhere?
You would be able to see it in
All
the, I believe, in the courts and ministerial section.
I'll look again.
Under miscellaneous,
Thanks. And then just one more question.
under general fund.
Under the Judicial Building Fund, again, these are not being appropriated here. You were just showing these to us. Thank you for that. And under rental agreements, 600,000, what are those?
The rental agreements are, we have a storage site in Sinahanya next to the public defender. The increase that came this year from the previous year is the Route 4 building that is currently getting set for renovation to house the probation division. So we are now paying lease on that. Also, the Northern Court and the Guam Law Library, the back part of that building is also being leased for our Judicial Education Center. Those 4 leases.
So prior to those new leases, what was that money being spent on?
It was primarily being spent on building maintenance. We used to have a annual contingency fund and judicial building fund of $75,000 a year. This year it's only $15,000. That's all that's left, and we're actually under the gun because a couple of our big chillers need to be replaced, and because of that, we're scrambling to find the money to do that.
And if we could get, after the last budget hearing, when we talked about the electronic monitoring and the 500,000 that was going to be appropriated for electronic monitoring, and the savings that would bring to the government of Guam as a whole, especially in DOC costs, after that, I think those numbers were not verified by DOC. So I'm asking if you could submit a new, maybe just a cost analysis or something like that, that just shows if there are any estimated cost savings by using electronic monitoring, and who would be the beneficiary of those cost savings.
Okay. We'll get that to you.
Thanks, I appreciate that. That would help us. And other than that, Mr. Speaker, I have no other questions, but thank you very much. Thanks.
Hafaday, Mr. Lozama, I believe you mentioned under the new therapeutic court programs, the GIVE program, the Guam's Immediate Violations Enforcement Program. I was a little unclear. You mentioned that involves grant funding?
Yes. Yes,
And
Senator.
that-
So what happens is we have a grant, which is for Project GIVE. And so when an individual needs to be sanctioned for testing positive, they go up to the Department of Corrections. There's a cost associated with that confinement period, be it 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. So within our grant write-up and approval, we now can pay for that cost, for that sanction. So there's graduated sanctions that will occur, and we're paying that cost. So that's an offset to the Department of Corrections. That's actually an offset to the government. So based on that, that's a savings.
Okay, I was just unclear because you mentioned it covers the cost of incarceration. I wasn't quite sure what that program was. But other than that, I think all the questions that I had were previously asked, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Chief Justice and Justices. The Vice Speaker touched on the Judicial Building Fund, and I wanted to inquire, what are the citations that go specifically into the Judicial Building Fund?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't say. It's in Title 7 of the Guam Code.
Yes, I think...
It's a combination of the traffic violations as well as some fines and fees based on the criminal code.
And this, all these citations, and I see it here in 2015, $2 million in citations, 1.8 in 16, 1.6 in 17, 1.6 in 18, and then 1.6 in 2019.
That's correct.
If we were to amend the law to perhaps stipulate it that make it a little bit more flexible to be used for other means other than what is currently be used for. Perhaps would that help with the electronic monitoring program, that you would be able to utilize these funds for the electronic monitoring program?
Sorry, go ahead.
There are some restrictions based on the indebtedness documents. So
it's basically determined.
I wouldn't want to make a commitment without knowing specifically what is proposed, and then we could look at the loan documents and see if that would be
So if
permitted.
if it is feasible to do, depending on your vision for the other buildings and your indebtedness, then would you be open to that?
If it's possible, we would be.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank you for all the work that you do also with the various programs that you have within the court system. I wanted to inquire about the adult drug courts. We sat several times to discuss your program there, and it's a very good program, so thank you for that, and thank you for all of the probation officers and everyone that is putting their assistance into making this program successful. But I wanted to inquire I didn't see a chart of the various positions, perhaps, but I was wondering if you would consider having peer support specialists under the courts as full-time employees. And I don't know if you're familiar with TOGI. They're like a non-profit group. So I was wondering if you would consider that to help with also the counseling program, and do you also have job placement programs for those
Senator,
that?
if I may, that is actually being explored through our grants. Peer support, and you see it when we establish the Veterans Treatment Court. There's peer support there, or there's folks. But in one of them, I think it was last year, the year before, at the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, they actually talked about peer support. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at within our grants. And then one of the things that's important is we can use a grant to pilot it to make sure it works before we see local funding to cover that in the future. So we can certainly look at that.
Okay, thank you. Do you have
This week I did sign, it's a small contract with that organization, but I'm not sure which of the treatment courts off the top of my head.
Okay. And do you have a job placement program? It seems like the adult drug court is modeled like something where, what was it before? What was behavioral health before? Mental health, right?
Mental.
It seems like they kind of took on the role of the mental health, but specifically for the courts, because of course you have to be in violation of the law to receive this kind of treatment or these kinds of programs that you've done so well. And so I was wondering, do you have also job placements within your adult drug court for those that are on probation? And
For the adult drug court, no, but as part of our adult Guam reentry program, there is partnerships with the Department of Labor, I forgot the name of the job placement, and so that's part of the adult reentry court. So we can certainly look at whether or not that can be made available to all of our specialty courts, as well as our traditional supervision of our clients.
okay,
With respect to the juvenile drug court, one of the primary community partners we've had is the Guam Chamber of Commerce. And they work with the youth, and they repeatedly said and I believe their companies do hire youth that successfully complete the juvenile drug court program.
but nothing set in stone or in place for the adult drug court just yet.
Wasn't the Trades Academy also very active with
And the Trades
that?
Academy is part of that too. It's part. So Trades Academy, Department of Labor, that's available to the clients. Exploring it to our other therapeutic courts is something that we need to look into as well.
Okay. And I was going through the budget, and in a lot of your in your salaries category, it says special pay, and you know I discovered it when I was looking at your IT services, your MIS, and then I noticed that you have special pay on almost every category of the way the judiciary is modeled, but it doesn't specifically say the amount and what is the special pay category. It just says special pay. So could we get a perhaps another breakdown on what type of special pay it is and
Sure.
and
There's two types of special pay that are embedded in the budget, the night differential and the hazardous pay. So the hazardous pay would only apply to marshals and probation officers. A night differential could apply to anybody at the court, depending on if they're working beyond, I believe, 6 p.m.
Okay, so it's like an overtime.
Not overtime. Overtime would be a separate special
Okay.
pay.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So it could be for anyone, the night differential.
Night differential could be, sometimes the magistrates have to work later hours, the clerks for the magistrates, and even for the judges in the Superior Court. So we have staff that end up working beyond the normal working hours.
Okay. So you don't give your IT personnel another incentive pay? In the federal government usually gives the IT personnel like a 15 to 25%.
Oh, no. Sometimes the IT people have to come in the middle of the night, power outage, servers go down, they have to come in. So they might log a couple hours of night differential pay, which I believe is, I'm not sure, maybe 10% on the hourly for that hour work that they would come in.
And then there's continued reference about the request for the 8th judge and almost like encouraging the vice speaker to. So I was just wondering, this 8th judge is a magistrate judge, no?
No, it's a full-time, a full position Superior Court judge.
A Superior Court judge. Okay. What is the difference between the magistrate and the Superior Court judge as far as duties?
The magistrate's duties are set out by law, and additional duties may be assigned by the Chief Justice. Except for doing the initial appearance and arraignment, they don't handle any felony cases. They may accept guilty pleas in misdemeanor cases, but they can't adjudicate or take to trial misdemeanor cases. They do handle the small claims cases, and we have a docket called the Master Court Calendar Docket, which involves post-adjudication collection cases. So if a judgment's entered in a civil case that is a collection case, then the magistrate judge would handle things like judgment debtor exams, sales of property, and so forth, but they don't adjudicate the civil cases. They handle uncontested divorce cases, but they can't adjudicate contested cases.
And where's the backlog at in the judiciary as far as caseload that would justify the addition of a Superior Court judge? Where's the backload? Does that make sense? Am I being clear?
When we did this study, we found three factors that contribute to the need for another judge. For many years, there were very few criminal trials. Now there's a number of criminal trials every year. That takes the Superior Court judge away from the other cases because they usually go full-time, whether it's 2 days or some go 6 weeks, depending on the nature of the case. That prevents that trial court judge from addressing civil cases because under the law, criminal cases must take priority. So civil and domestic cases get pushed back. The other factor are the specialty courts also require a lot of time for the judges to address those cases. So between the increase in criminal trials and the specialty courts, many of the Superior Court duties are focused on the criminal docket. That results in the backlog to certain civil cases. I would say that I believe while Chief Justice Torres was in office as Chief Justice, he assigned the magistrate the uncontested divorces. So they're doing that. So I would say a lot of the backlog comes primarily from the present caseload of the trial judges and the civil docket.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just wanted to commend the court because I saw this yesterday, so I forgot to react again today, but I want to very much commend you that the changes in detainee population from 2016 to today are from 400 to now an average of 198. It's quite significant. The same thing at DYA. I think I told you, Chief Justice, that this pretty much was mind-blowing to me. We've reduced from 2016 averages of 75 to 80 to 26. That's incredible. And I thank you for that, especially the DYA. I think your explanation was that you found partners that can more appropriately take care of these, the needs of these juveniles according to your risk assessment tools that you've been using. And so I know that was the goal of the new tools, and it looks like it's working. So I want to thank you for that. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues for joining me today, and I want to especially thank you, Madam Chief Justice, Justice Carbolito, Justice Torres, for honoring us with your presence today and for this presentation. Again, we commend the judiciary for the way that it's handled itself in this current fiscal crisis, and you can count on our continued support. We try. I get criticized for it. You are my favorite child, it seems. And so, but I understand that not only are you co-equal, but a very important part of the body politic. So I thank you very much for the presentation. Did you want to go?
I just wanted to reaffirm that if other questions arise as you consider the budget, our personnel are ready and able to speak with you about that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we stand in recess until 1:30 this afternoon when we meet with the Office of Public Accountability.